And I would like now in this video to shift towards perceptual development. And that will be the last form of development that we're going to be orienting towards in NeuroSystemics. And so just before we jump right in, I'll invite us to take a moment and just listen, feel into the moment, into the body, into the sound. Here and now. Noticing the quality of perception in this moment, of our body, of our environment. Just settling in. Supporting ourselves towards a gentle autonomic state of social engagement. Slowly, gently supporting ourselves towards a higher state. All right, so let us go right into it. So this is our general map. And so we began with relational development. We followed on with state development. And we saw that the purpose of state development is to increase the average, the depth of states. And we're now moving on to perceptual development. And as I said, this will be the last pathway, the last modality in which we'll be endeavoring in terms of our developmental trajectory. So this is a picture of our cosmos. This is a picture of a wide range of phenomenal experience. Isn't it beautiful? And this cosmos is the result of billions of years of evolution. Billions of years of evolution. It's taken us billions of years, 14 billion since the Big Bang, scientists tell us, for us to be able to get to where we are today. And there has been an infinite number of shifts, an infinite number of developments, of movement, of growth for life that we are to exist and to thrive as it is in the world today. As you and I are sitting here and experiencing this moment in this organismic capacity that we are. And one of the ways in which we can describe the entire evolutionary process, from these minute particles, subatomic particles, all the way up until the massively organized, self-organizing organismic capacity that we are here, in terms of an increased orderly complexity. Increased orderly complexity. Those three words could summarize our entire evolutionary trajectory. And so we'll go into a little bit more explanation as to what we mean by increased orderly complexity. So we already had a look at this pyramid of evolution, whereby taken from Maslow's theory of needs, rearranged in terms of all of the emerging science in social psychology, whereby we needed relationships. We need relationships in order for us to survive. And so they are prior to our physiological needs. And then again, we developed through greater form of experience, through affective capacities, cognitive capacities, and mystic capacities. And so we saw, like in terms of states, that there are increasing capacities for well-being as we develop in our capacity, organismic capacity, relational, physiological, etc. And we can also describe our evolutionary trajectory in terms of a greater complexification of our journey, and complexification in terms of our perceptual drives. So we could say that our main perceptual drive that is connected with our capacity for relationship is survival, right? It's thanks to, as social beings, it is thanks to our relationships that we are able to survive. And Stephen Porges describes a lot about the shift that we've gone through as mammals. Physiologically, we need to sustain ourselves, right? So we need to drink, we need to breathe, we need to eat, sleep, reproduce. So our physiological needs can be described as a way to sustain ourselves. So at a physiological level, the main perceptual drive is sustenance. The main perceptual drive in terms of our affective experience, our affective capacity, is to socialize. You could say the purpose of affect is to socialize. So when we could say that then emotions, whether I feel sadness or whether I feel anger, those emotions actually give me some information and give the people around me some information with respect to what I'm experiencing, perhaps with respect to what I need, or perhaps with respect to something I desire. So we could understand affect as a form of communication, as a form of information, and that has arisen evolutionarily, much more in a much more pronounced way in social species. In terms of cognition, like I was describing in one of the earlier videos, in the Upper Paleolithic revolution 30 to 50,000 years ago, we started to there was a revolution at that during that whole historical phase, whereby we engaged in a more complex, more interactive, in a more dynamic way with our cognitive capacity to start relating to one another through culture, drawings, through symbols. And that requires a reflexive capacity whereby we're able to start relating to reality or to our environment, to other people, in a more abstract way, in a more conceptual way. And finally, we have a mystic perceptual drive. And at a mystic level, the way in which our perception, our perceptual capacity, or the perceptual development is driven is towards self-reflexivity, which means that we're not then just thinking or analyzing in terms of what we'd like to communicate or the ways in which we can engage with our environment, our surroundings. We're actually increasing in a way the abstractness or the subtlety of how we relate to ourselves and to our environment, to our communities, our friends, our families, through a much more refined form of perception. And this occurs through our capacity for self-reflexivity. So just to give you an example, to try to be a bit more concrete, in my capacity to think about how I feel and to say, you know, I had anger in that moment, or I had frustration, or I had happiness, and start to reflect, was that happiness appropriate? What is the nature of that happiness? So really taking on our mindfulness, our contemplative abilities, our interoceptive skills to probe a bit deeper into the nature of reality, into the nature of phenomenal experience that we sense from moment to moment. And so that's what we call self-reflexivity, is when we're able to actually look into ourselves as though we were our own laboratory, which we can't, of course, entirely, totally, because our very perception influences that which is perceived. Those are insights that are coming through in, as far as I can understand, in quantum science, which limits our epistemological capacity, limits that which we can know in the world. And there's several scientific theories, mathematical theories that go in the direction whereby actually the knowledge, or our capacity for knowledge is fundamentally flawed or fundamentally incomplete. Gödel's incompleteness mathematical theorem, and certain quantum scientists like Heisenberg have also described how we're limited in our ability to really understand the nature of waves or particles, because the way in which we would interact with them in order to understand them that in itself has an influence, which is actually one of the key parts around complexity theory and systemics, because it gives us just a slight account, a slight insight as to why the relationship is so important. The relationship is so important, whether it's within ourselves or a relationship with ourselves, with our clients, with our communities, with the world. It's so important because the way in which we relate will influence that which we relate to. So we saw earlier that, you know, our capacity to keep a safe space, to hold a certain emotional, psychological, somatic bandwidth for the people that we'll be working with, people that we'll be playing with and dancing with, you know, in this social engagement process. That has a direct impact on the way in which they experience their lives, their affect, their somatic vibrations. So that whole exploration of relationality and that which exists in the space between things is really, really important, and we'll go much deeper into that later on. And it's really key to understanding the functioning of perception in this whole trajectory that we're developing here, perceptual development, because perception is one of the primary functions, one of the primary, you could say, tools of how we experience the world. We experience the world through our lens of perception. And so what we do with that perception actually influences everything that we experience, because it is involved in everything.